the state of Texas only separate these two. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians, hosted by Zach Bechtold and Matt Franks. If you'd like to learn more about the Bearded Theologians, you can go online at www.beardedtheologians.com. We hope you enjoy our podcast today. You're listening to the Bearded Theologians, hosted by Matt Franks,
Zach Bechtold.
And this week on the Bearded Theologians, we're going to talk. I kind of came across this question this week in my Covenant Bible study groups that I offer here at my church, and I felt it was a good question for Zach and I to discuss this week. And so the question is, who taught you to live a holy life? So Zach, let you reflect on that.
That's as we talked in the pre-meeting meeting, it's a hard question. It's one that I don't think about often. Who taught me to be holy? But that's one of the things that we talk about as Methodists and as clergy. Are we moving on to perfection? And I kind of see that as the same question. Are we moving on towards holiness? And for me, the folks that have taught me, I couldn't name one person, and that's maybe a good thing, maybe it's not. But there's a few people in my life who have shown me inside and outside of the church what it means to be holy. I think I'd have to start with my parents. They really encouraged us, ingrained in us growing up that it doesn't matter who people are, where they're from, what they do, they're people, and we're called to love. You need to love them, stick up for them. They weren't, my parents weren't church people. But that's how they were. And so they didn't use the church lingo type things, but that was their intent. We are there, and we use what we have to stick up for those who don't have a voice, who are getting picked on, who need help. And so that has had a really big impact on my life moving towards holiness. And then I can think of a small handful of pastors and colleagues and people that I've met throughout the church who have given me examples of how to pray, how to read, how to interact, and simply how to take care of myself. I can tell you the number of pastors who have told me this is probably two, and they're all retired, who look at my ministry and my calendar and say, you got to slow down. Don't miss time with your family. Make sure you're taking care of yourself. Make sure that at the end of the day, when you retire, you don't say the same things that I do of, gosh, I wish I was in the office more, or it's not that. That's always their encouragement. You're never going to retire and say, man, I wish I worked more. It's always, I wish I spent more time with my kids when they were little. I wish I spent more time with my wife. I wish I built those relationships up more and didn't let the church get in the way. And so it's through those things, those people in my life who have taught me how to be holy. And then there are a handful of mentors that I have that are dead, that are the saints, biblical, Jesus, obviously, but Peter is a guy that I really look up to because I feel like I see a lot of myself in Peter. But the saints, St. Francis, just people like that we read their stories, we see how they live their life, and strive to live in the same manner. What about you, Frank?
Well, as I think about that, and I've had to answer to it a couple of times this week in the Bible study, and it's been interesting that each time it's been a little bit different. Because I've started really thinking about what does that word holy mean, and as I begin to unpack that word holy, I could use the word sacred, I could use the word special, I could use the word. I mean, there's so many words that we could use for that word holy, and as I think of holy, I think of that Christ-filled life of being present, but also showing people how to love God and to love their neighbor as herself. And as I think about that, the people that were definitely inspiring to me were those people that helped bring me into the faith, that loved me and cared for me and showed me that I can be a Christian and I don't have to be like those people that are sending people to hell, because that was my early experience with Christianity, is that judgmental, conservative side that just was not very healthy for me. And the more I unpacked that and started seeing people around me who were being very faithful and living a life that was full of grace and mercy, the more I wanted part of that. And so those people, and they know who they are, I've shared with them. But the discipline life, the spiritual discipline life really came from Dr. John Starkey. He was my professor at Oklahoma City University. And not only through the classes that he taught, but just the way he modeled spiritual discipline and how he shared about spiritual disciplines. It was actually in a class on kind of spiritual practices that I really started really looking at that and gaining that kind of life. And it was very impactful for me in my ministry. And then from the ministry side of things, it's those pastors know who they are because I've shared with them, and they've just made such an impact on me on how I want to be a better pastor, and then how to function out of that, and how to learn from their mistakes, like you've said. And it's also the same thing for me, is that I look at that from the teaching side. How can I train people to be better pastors? Because if I can train them to be better, then that also trains me a little bit, because the teacher should be learning from their students and how I can be better as well. And then, of course, for me, not only is Jesus and the Bible, that's, I love Mark's gospel. There's some holiness to that for me that speaks to me, but also in John Wesley's life and the struggle that he always dealt with. He really struggled with his salvation and whether or not he was living a holy life, and created a movement that called in for spiritual discipline, but to also be socially active and be willing to speak truth to power when need be. And that has definitely had a profound impact on me. And so, as you think about this, and as you've wrestled with this, we said this is a hard question, and you're right, we could actually unpack this for days. What do you think a key component would be to help provide people to live a holy life?
I think, man, quit asking hard questions. It's hard to generalize that, because it's going to be different from person to person. But I think, at least for me in my life and my ministry, and my onward to perfection, would be just being self-aware of where I've been wrong, and where I know I need to get better, and being able to own that. Because too often we get into that rut of, I did this, but it wasn't my fault. Sometimes it's hard for us to take ownership in our failures, because it's hard for us to own that. And so I think it's being able to look back, whether it be yesterday or 10 years ago, and be like, oh crap, I missed the boat. My bad. Now what do I have to learn from that? In hearing that criticism from people, whether it's justified or not, and is there truth in it? We live in a fishbowl, and everything that we do and say is under the microscope, and even things we don't do and don't say are under the microscope. And so it's trying to find little bits of truth, if there is any, in moving forward, and taking those bits and pieces to say, okay, here's where I get better. Because I've watched way too many people in inside and outside of ministry, think they have it, and never listen, never learn, and burn out and hate what they're doing. And I don't want to be that way. And although those conversations are hard to have and hard to hear sometimes they're welcomed. And it's being just true to that, and going with it, and moving on. An interesting thing you said, just with John Wesley and his struggles. My co-pastor and I were talking the other day about our saints, about the people that we look up to. And when they get late in life, they seem to be more candid about what's going on in their lives, about their revelations, about their spiritual growth, about their holiness. And I find that a fascinating thing. Is it a matter of they're just getting older, and they know their time is coming, and they're just going to be a little more candid? Or have they been striving for that holiness and are finally into a point where they can express it? And I don't want to wait till I'm late in life for that. I want to be able to do that as an ongoing thing. But I find that as a fascinating thing. We see, John Wesley, Mother Teresa, St. Francis, Augustine, you see as they get later in life, they just begin to unpack these revelations. And it's like, where was that? Did you just now come to that? Or is that something, I would assume that's something they'd been working through and processing. But why now? Why now was the time late in life for you to express that?
I think for me, it's my theology and how I operate is all based on love, because it was love that brought me in. It is love that has nurtured me through. It is love that has helped me even in the hardest of times. It's love that has propelled me and perpetuated me to do some things, to grow closer to God. And it's because I love God that I really strive to be the best that I can be. And not only that, but then sharing that love with other people. And sometimes that means having a hard conversation and also recognizing in the midst of that hard conversation, whether I agree or disagree with them, is that I can agree to love them. And that's one thing I can hold my hat on. Even if I don't like what they said, even if they're other candidate supporter or they like the other team, I can still love them and not hold that over them and let that be a barrier between us, and that we can learn from each other even though that we're different. And I think that for me, that is where my holy living and my holy life have really been enriched, is that I've found myself in those situations where I've been with people that I don't necessarily agree with, but the real question is, how do I love them? How do I show them what love looks like? And even though I know they may not love me, how can I show love? And so love is my foundation. It is where my theology rests. And, that's kind of where I hang my hat on that sort of stuff.
Well, and it is. And that's the most important thing, because we live in a culture and a world that we let the very few things that divide us. And we could agree on 99% of the things, but that 1% that divides us, that's what's going to be. That's what we're going to focus on. That's what it's going to be. And we have to change that. And it's going to take a change of culture that says we're not going to ignore the things we disagree about, but we're going to come to the table. We're going to have the conversation. And at the end of the day, we still may not agree with one another, but we love each other. And we love each other enough to come to the table, to have the conversation, and to still leave respectfully, to leave with that love in our hearts for a fellow human being. That's huge. That's huge.
And maybe it goes back to that song, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me.
Sure.
And that the real struggle is that a lot of people don't have peace in their own lives, a piece of knowledge and understanding. It's not that they have to have all the answers. It's not that they have to have it's not that like they need to know everything. It's just peace. Mm-hmm. And peace isn't knowledge. I think far too often we confuse peace with answers and knowledge. And I really think that peace is the feeling that even though I don't know, I know that I'm loved by God, and I know that no matter what, I'm going to work this out, and it's going to take some time. And maybe that's where modern thought, when modern thought took things and put them in boxes and categories and organization, maybe that's where modern thought goes wrong, is that it tries to categorize everything. And so we wrestle with trying to categorize something that maybe we can't categorize, or maybe doesn't fit into our box, because, we create these categories like Democrat and Republican and independent. And if you're not one of the three, then you're a nut, or, whatever it is. And the world does not operate that way. The world calls us to be together and live in relationship with one another, and be willing to work through that difficult stuff. And so until we're willing to work through that difficult stuff, the stuff that's eating us alive, how can we bring peace on earth and live a holy life until we really look at ourselves and see where we are not living holy? That great Wesleyan question, how is it with your soul? Most people don't want to answer that question well, because it's troubling to them. And, it's in the midst of that trouble where we turn and say, okay, God, I don't have it, and I need you in my life. And where can I find rest in thee? And then, when we look at the scriptures, being still, and it's something like you shared, is that in order to grow, sometimes being still is like one of the best things that we can do. But we also have to agree to move forward, because sometimes we can just be still and never do anything, and we're okay with where we're at instead of trying to grow. Growing is painful. It's not something that we can do lightly. And so as we think about this, as we think about holy living, ask yourself this real good question is, how is it with your soul? Start from there and then see where God leads you and see how God is calling you to grow in grace and love and mercy. And I think when you do that, you'll be able to really kind of point yourself in a better direction in your spiritual life. And then that begins to develop, because if we're living a true spiritual life, it sends us out into the world to be the light of the world. And so that let peace begin with me is so vital, but you can't let it begin with you until you work on yourself first.
Well, and that's the thing. When we begin to ask ourselves that question and we begin to work through it, they're going to be growing pains. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be tough. When John Wesley asked that question, he didn't ask it because it was an easy question. He asked it because it makes you think. It makes you self-reflect. It makes you more aware of who you are and where you're going. And the road ahead is never easy. Because Christ is always calling us. God is always calling us out of where we are and into something new and different. That's not always fun. And so there are going to be some growing pains and things there. But just be aware of that and be able to struggle through that and know that you have a community of faith. These people who are helping you be holy or calling you to holiness or teaching you how to do it, go to them. And be that person for somebody else. And so as you reflect upon these questions, how is it with your soul? Who's calling you or who's teaching you how to be holy? I'd ask the opposite question. How are you teaching the people around you to be holy? We want to have that conversation with you. Post it on our Facebook, our Instagram, our website, all of our social media pages. Please have a conversation with us. Even if it's through text message and things like that, those of you who know us personally, let's have the conversation. That's why we're here. That's why we do this. We want to be in conversation with you and take this to your friends. If you don't take it to us, share it, have the conversation on your Facebook page, wherever. But we want to wrap things up for today after we've asked you some hard questions, made your head hurt. Go get a cup of coffee, ponder these things, pray about them, and have the conversation. And as we wrap up today, we want to, again, thank you for checking us out, for being, very supportive of what we're doing. We appreciate it. We appreciate your thoughts and prayers, your comments. We do want to encourage you, again, to share on Facebook, share on Twitter, Instagram, share these podcasts wherever you can with whoever you can. But we would really appreciate your reviews. Leave reviews wherever you're down. If you're downloading the podcast on iTunes or Google Play, please leave a review so that we know you're listening, so that people will see it and be excited too. Facebook the same way. Wherever you listen to us, even if it's YouTube, if you watch the videos, leave us a comment, leave us a review. We greatly value that and greatly appreciate it. It helps us get better at what we do. And we also want to encourage you to, if you didn't hear our Through Simple Rules series, we'd love for you to go back and listen to that. We're really proud of that one. We're proud of all of them, but that one's a good one to go back and introduce you into. And then check out our interview with Bishop Harvey from last week about the flooding and recovery in Louisiana and everything that's going on there. We want to continue to raise awareness for that. That's going to be a long-term recovery. And as you plan your mission trips and groups and things, think about them and how maybe if you can go out and help as long-term recovery. But we have a ton of podcasts up through iTunes and Google Play, and we have all of them archived on YouTube. So if you would, go check them out, dig into the archives, leave us a review, and share it on your social media. We certainly appreciate it and appreciate your support. So for that, we're the Bearded Theologians. I'm Zach Bechtold.
And I'm Matt Franks.
Thanks for listening.
You just listened to the Bearded Theologians podcast. If you'd like to learn more about the Bearded Theologians, you can go online at beardedtheologians.com.